Why are so many American homes flimsy, or at least flimsy compared to other parts of the world? So one thing I've noticed is that in a lot of American states, wood is primarily used as the building material, which I'm guessing is probably cheaper than using like brick and stone. Probably makes it quicker to build the house as well, because you can just, put up the wood quicker than laying brick by brick. But does that make the homes less durable? Like in terms of like if there's a tornado, is it easier to destroy a house if it's made out of wood than if it's made out of brick? I would imagine yes, because brick is heavier. You use cement to stick them together. Or are there other reasons why American homes are, generally a little bit weaker than they are in other parts of the world?
You can hear conversations through the walls.
The amount of cargo.
Footsteps. You can hear conversations through the walls.
The amount of cargo.
Footsteps up the stairs. Banging pots in the kitchen when you're across the house. That's just life in most American homes. Walls are thin and the opposite of soundproof. And something always needs to be fixed. And most homes aren't even that old. There should be no excuse that they're falling apart. But why are they like this, especially when other areas have sturdy, thick houses that last hundreds and hundreds of years? The answer isn't just capitalism, so don't click off the video just yet. It's actually a lot more complex, and the solution isn't easy.
Because a wooden house, it's not going to be as strong as a brick house. I just don't think that's possible.
If you're looking for one quick thing to blame, you can look towards George Washington's snow. In 1832, the civil engineer was tasked with building a Chicago warehouse as quickly as possible from the local softwood. So he got creative. Snow used 2x4s to assemble hollow walls, several stories high. The method let individual workers handle assembly, leaving only one person to nail it all into place. Snow completed the warehouse in record time. The method was called balloon framing, and it became the construction method of choice in Chicago. But balloon framing didn't take off until the 1940s, when America was experiencing a post-war boom period.
Right.
More Americans had money than ever before.
So needed houses to be built as quickly as possible. I see. But balloon framing, just because it worked for the warehouse, it shouldn't have been used for everything else. Maybe just for warehouses.
And they wanted the American dream, a house. They could suddenly afford to buy homes in sprawling new suburbs. And contractors knew they could make a killing if they could produce enough homes to satisfy the demand. Balloon framing and its successor, platform framing, allowed contractors to frame houses basically overnight. But there was something unique about balloon framing that made it only feasible in certain countries, like the US and Canada, and not in Europe. Balloon framing requires a massive quantity of long, mature trees. And America had an abundance of super tall, mature trees. Plus, it was an easy and cheap construction material for the newly growing suburbs. Wood is sturdy.
But if it's a cheap material to use, are those cost savings passed on to the consumer, the person buying the house? Probably not. Probably not. All that money goes to the company, doesn't it? To the construction company.
Yet flexible enough to withstand low-intensity earthquakes and tornadoes. If you want to hear about all of wood's good qualities, check out our video on the subject here. In Europe, wood is still incredibly expensive because so few forests remain, and what they do have is heavily protected. So the average European home is built with brick, stone, or concrete, and they're many centuries old. These materials can be sturdier and safer than wood. A concrete masonry wall has a, shocker, higher fire insulation property rating compared to a wooden frame wall. One of these concrete walls has a fire rating of around 4 hours till it's destroyed.
Like to me, California, for example, with all of the fires that happen there, it's a no-brainer that properties built from now on should be primarily out of concrete and brick and stone. Like, why would you have a place where wildfires happen all the time and you build all of the houses out of a highly flammable material. It doesn't make any sense to me. Like, does it make sense to you? Like, I just don't get it. Like, this should have been done like decades ago.
As compared to a wooden framed wall, which only has a rating of around an hour. Insurance carriers also have long-term data suggesting that homes constructed of brick are less likely to be destroyed by natural hazards.
Yeah.
And if saving money is your game, the U.S. Department of Energy estimates that you could save $340 a month or over $4,000 a year on heating and cooling.
Right, because brick is a good insulator, I think.
If you live in a brick house over a wood one. It's estimated that losses from wildfires have added up to $5.1 billion over the past 10 years, a number made even more bloated by all the wood-framed houses. Now, to be clear, wood isn't necessarily a bad building material. I mean, take a look at the Fairbanks house in Dedham, Massachusetts. It's been standing since 1637. But in general, wood is harder to maintain. In fact, without maintenance, many houses won't make it to 30 years.
Wow.
And to many Americans,
30 years, that's not a long time at all. Like, for a house, yeah, that's not a long time.
that's just the right amount of time. The U.S. Census says that the average American moves houses 11 times in their lifetime.
Wow.
That figure across 16 European countries, about 4 times.
Yeah, 11 times is a lot. Like, my family moved into the family house in 2002. So yeah, we've been in there for 23 years now.
Since Americans are constantly moving their homes, they don't need them to last as long. They expect a semi-new home wherever they go because with the increased owner turnover, regular maintenance isn't normally done. It's easier just to rip it down
And start again, wow.
and start over fresh. But why do Americans move around so much? You can blame the job market. In America, it's much more common to hop around between companies. The opposite is true in the European Union. The World Bank reports that the median tenure of the average US employee was 4 years, while the median tenure in the EU was 10 years. Part of that
I do think that is changing though. Like, the younger generation is literally job hopping 1.5 to 2 years because it's the best way to get a salary bump, isn't it? Like, just to get a new job.
culture of constantly shifting jobs is moving to a new area to take that job, meaning you've got to move houses. So, short story, blame George Washington Snow. Long story, blame the shifting US job market. Interestingly, we aren't the only country in the world to have famously flimsy houses. We share that title with Japan, and they're actually worse than us. Houses in Japan depreciate like cars do in the US.
Wow.
After 20 years, a Japanese house typically loses all of its value and is, on average, torn down just 30 years after being built. According to a paper by the Nomura Research Institute, it's a major obstacle to affluence for Japanese families.
Yeah.
The collective waste is approximately an annual loss of 4% of Japan's total GDP. The total amount of new houses built in Japan every year is on par with the United States, despite having only a third of its population.
But why don't they maybe use different materials? Like, like I mentioned before, if they just say from today, any new house has to be built using this material or using these methods, like, to slow down the turnover in having to build a new house again and again, over time, like, the number of new houses being built will just decrease, won't it?
Which is shrinking every year. 87% of Japan's home sales are new homes, compared to only 11 to 34% in Western countries. Part of the reason for this is that the Japanese love new things. Their frequent and severe earthquakes make old houses, cheap wood frame houses from the same post-war boom we had, dangerous and without proper seismic reinforcement. It's considered futile to invest in their maintenance or try to improve them.
Wow.
That's especially reinforced, the Nomura Research Institute says, by concepts of impermanence in the Shinto religion. Take a look at Issei's Grand Shinto Shrine, a huge religious site that is rebuilt from scratch every 20 years. Unfortunately, it's very expensive when you apply that same principle to houses. Americans wanted cheap homes to fulfill their dreams of home ownership after World War II. But the tricks that contractors used to make that happen have made it easy for us to view homes as disposable and unworthy of repair. But times could be changing. A recent trend that hasn't unseated wooden framing yet is modular or prefabricated homes. Modular homes are constructed in sections away from the building site and then put together on the property.
But I mean, if they're still made out of wood and, the same materials, the same methods, how does that change the inevitable outcome of needing to rebuild it in 30 years' time? It doesn't really change anything.
But they're actually framed with 8 to 10% more wood, so they're extra strong for transportation, and are designed to be sturdier than regular homes. Instead of nails and screws, walls are connected using joints and strong glues. It's a method that has become increasingly popular for making tiny homes, but hasn't managed to beat out balloon framing on the most important thing to contractors: price. Modular homes sell for less than regular homes, even though they can be slightly cheaper to make, so contractors avoid them in favor of more profit. If Americans decided to stay put in one home and invest in it, that might change. But the cheap efficiency of wooden framing and the necessity of moving to advance one's career are hard lures to resist, especially when everyone else is doing it. So I suppose you can really just blame it on trying to keep up with the Joneses.
Right.
How many?
Yeah, this one for me, maybe I don't have all of the information here, but in places where, there's a lot of natural disasters which causes homes to, constantly be destroyed or damaged, it makes sense just to make them as strong and as durable as possible. And, if brick is shown, as the lady said, to be stronger and more durable than wood, just use stone. I know it's more expensive. Yeah, the issue is then the construction company is going to pass on that cost to the consumer, and the consumer is maybe not going to be able to afford the cost of it. Yeah, that's the big drawback, I suppose, because it's a tricky one. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.